How's going guys, welcome to the channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto was the leader of the Isekai team? Part 1. Huge shout out to Mad Raptor Fanfiction for this story. If you wants to see awesome fanfiction like this, don't forget to subscribe. Now let's get into the video. The K-Mabe nobody is coming to save me. After a firm 17 years of waiting for somebody to come and either wake him up, rescue his mind, or do something about his current situation, Uzumaki Naruto had to admit that it was possible that he wasn't going to be getting any help at all. It was a sorry situation to find oneself in, but it was the situation that Naruto currently found himself in. 1 reincarnation. 2 brain swap. 3 memory transplant. 4 soul transfer. 5 gain jutsu. 17 years ago, one day Naruto just woke up to find himself a baby just being born into a new world. He just woke up as a baby and he had no idea what to make of his situation, and of course he bore witness to the woman who gave birth to him commit suicide within days of giving birth to him. She tried to drown him in a tub of water and she even refused to give him a name. Most likely didn't help that the man who was to be his father burned down the hospital that he had been born in and tried to kill him as well. Why? Because he had been born with 9 fox tails sticking out of his tailbone, and boy were they a hassle to deal with in daily living. Now that he was properly 17 years old again, though it was hard to mentally mature when you weren't even the same physical age as your memories. Now, at the age of 17 each of his tails was close to 1/3 of his body height, so each one was about 55 to 60 centimeters long, bright orange tails that were just way too fluffy for his own good, and soft too. So, Naruto had spent 17 years just surviving in this new world. Somehow he managed to activate his semblance thing as a baby, and it saved him from drowning in the bathtub his mother attempted to murder him in. He had such a dumb semblance, it was powerful and useful, but the fact that he hated it was because apparently a semblance represented an important part of the owner's soul. It was the manifestation of their aura, their soul, and he could only guess what is meant for him. Still, in 17 years Naruto had come up with 5 possible things and he had managed to rule most of them out. 1 reincarnation. Ruled out, not the same dimension. 2 brain swap. Ruled out because he found it highly unpleasant of an idea that a newborn baby got its brain transplanted in his across dimensions. He ruled it out purely because he hated the idea. 3 memory transplant. Not ruled out because maybe his chakra leaked into this dimension somehow and infected a baby that was this dimension's version of him. 4 soul transfer. Likely, it was just likely. 5 gain jutsu. Not likely, he had felt pain many times. Tested what it would take to wake him from a possible gain jutsu, and his dumb learned pretty quickly that he was not in a gain jutsu. He pinched his cheek, broke fingers, punched and kicked himself, smacked himself in the balls, and jumped off a building. His pain tolerance just made it so that he wasn't confident that what he did was enough pain to wake him from a powerful enough gain jutsu. So, another thing to do would be to replicate an injury that he knew he shouldn't be able to replicate. Naruto removed his right arm from, not the entire thing, just the same amount of right arm he had lost in his fight against Sasuke. He crushed it underneath a tree and then cut it off, and once he woke up in the hospital, he learned pretty quickly that no wasn't in a gain jutsu and he destroyed his right arm for nothing. Right side cool new robot arm. Naruto appreciated the look of his fake arm. It had the right proportions, like somebody copy and pasted his left arm, flipped it and put it on his right arm. It was the perfect size, decently durable, and there was a grappling hook-like feature built into it so that he could use his hand and eject it, grab onto stuff, and reel himself in. Arcsade was a dumb for even trying that out in the first place, but at least I ruled out gain jutsu on their bright side. Naruto stood up. 170 centimeters tall, just about where he had been when he was 17 years old in his previous life or previous world, or whatever. His last recorded height was 166 centimeters, but he was sure he had grown a little since then. Super messy, an uncontrollable mess of blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and a lean build that he believed he had decently covered up with his outfit. 3 whisker marks on each cheek, apparently part of the burning hospital building, had left him with some scars. So, he could thank his now deceased father for his scars on his face. He wore a white shirt with a red spiral inked onto the front, with an open orange vest that he wore over it, sleeveless. Finally just regular jeans and black sandals on and a holster attached to his left leg that held his weapon. Kurama. That was what he named his weapon, since he was without his fox buddy in this world. Naruto named his gun after his friend. It was the handle of a sword with the guard of the sword being a revolver with different kinds of vials of dust loaded into it. Considering he wasn't exactly a weapon user in his life, though he could use many different weapons, his weapon was just a short sword with a blade that retracted into the handle. The blade could gain the effects of the vials of dust that were loaded up into it. The front of the short sword would typically glow whatever color of dust that was currently loaded up into the active chamber of the sword, and he could switch them out rather easily. Fire, ice, wind, electricity, water, plant, rock, gravity, and the final element of dust he could load into his sword was steam, the combination of fire and water dust. So 17 years and none of my friends have rescued me at all. This isn't a game just when I have memories up to about 10 days after the war and deadbit I might just be missing memories. Naruto hung out on the top of a building in Vale, one of the most Faunus-friendly kingdoms or so he heard. Faunus, humans with animal traits, special abilities included night vision, sensitive senses of smell, and if you had animal ears, sensitive hearing. They were pretty much just humans with something extra attached, but there was super heavy dissemination against them in 3 of the 4 kingdoms of Remnant, the world he was in. Naruto had met 2 other people who were reincarnated into this world from other dimensions. He watched them unalive themselves shortly after learning that there were more people like them, so he knew that he wasn't the only person in this world that had been dropped here in a body from this world. It felt almost like some higher power was playing with the lives of people scattered across the universes for their own amusement because it just didn't seem like they were in this world for any particular reason. Naruto had a theory. The gut feeling. It was like some kind of magnetic force telling him that if he went to Beacon, he might be able to find more people like him. If he was being used as a game piece by some kind of higher being, then his gut feelings might just be that higher being giving him a clue as to what he needed to do. Every part of him just wanted to ignore his gut feeling, just despite that higher power, but the other part of him was too curious about where his gut feeling would lead him. Thus, he applied to go to Beacon. He wondered who he would meet while he was there. It was a shame. Her name was Yor Brier and she murdered her parents by complete and utter mistake of who they were. Well, it wasn't a mistake in that she did it on purpose, she killed both of her parents with a knife to the back of their heads in their sleep. They didn't wake up or feel a thing, but the shame came from the fact that she hadn't realized that killing her parents wouldn't restore her back to reality. One day, she just woke up in a world with a language she didn't understand, as a 2-month-old baby. She had memories up to the age of 19 or 20 years old from a previous incarnation, life, or something. She didn't understand what happened, so she waited around and watched, learned the language, and tried to understand what kind of world she was in. She thought it was a government hypnosis experiment. She hoped that a great emotional shock to her system would wake her up from her prolonged hypnosis, and she could think of no greater shock to her system than murdering her own parents. Well, they were her parents but at the same time, it wasn't like she had ever considered them her parents either. She had memories of her real parents, her real little brother, and her memories after the age of 19 were blurry at best and impossible to recognize at worst. I am so sorry for murdering you both but at least now I can start going by my real name instead of the name you two called me. Yor had been called the wrong name for 17.5 years now while she trained, gathered her strength, and practiced killing by accepting under-the-table assassination jobs. Now she had herself a good assassination outfit and a very good set of thorns to use. Her weapon? Rose thorns. They were golden daggers shaped like thorns, and hidden inside of them she loaded it with gravity dust so that she could never lose her weapon. It was simple, but with how hard she could throw it, it was pretty much a gun, a knife, and a boomerang combined into one weapon thanks to the dust. She couldn't quite get clothes that matched her old outfit. It was still a black dress with red on the inside of it to give it accent colors, the black of the dress like her hair, and the same red color as her eyes. I am so sorry, if I had known killing you wouldn't wake me up, I wouldn't have done it yet at least this lets me know that maybe I'm not under some kind of hypnosis or maybe I just wasn't emotionally attached enough. Yor wasn't quite sure what it was. She didn't have any other theories about what happened and why she woke up as a baby one day. Either way, the house she lived in was currently on fire, so she needed to get out. She was starting all over. She was going to blend in with society and use her strengths to her advantage, and thankfully she had the perfect goal. To become a huntress and an assassin. She just enjoyed killing people a little too much to give it up that easy. It was just her true calling, turning bodies into corpses was too much of a rush for her to easily give up. Not when it paid her so well and she had so much experience. She just needed to go to a school that wouldn't ask too many questions about her past, which ruled out Atlas. Her best bet would be Vacuo, but Vale was closer to her current location. She had already submitted her application to Beacon, so she just needed to accept. She was sure she aced the test. Days later. She felt relief. Not happiness, but relief when she was informed that she had been accepted into Beacon. She was able to relax while drinking a cup of coffee at a local shop, reading her acceptance letter. It helped that she had filed the paperwork under her real name and she had used the apartment that she stayed at in secret without this world's version of her parents knowing. She did make some nice money with her assassinations and she managed to get real fake paperwork with her true name on it. Yor Brier, because the girl this country knew her as died when she burned down the house with her fake real parents. So confusing but at least with Isekai can make an even more honest living. Nobody would suspect a huntress of Yor almost said it out loud, so she quickly covered her mouth to prevent anyone from knowing what her preferred line of work was. Oh. Yor covered her eyes when there was a bright reflection right in them. Somebody passed by her. She blinked and rubbed her eyes again when she just got a very familiar look at him, like he stuck out in her memories for some reason. She saw messy blonde hair, an athletic lean build, and blue eyes pass by her. She rubbed her eyes and then noticed that the figure didn't quite match up with any of her memories when she saw the 9 foxtails and whisker marks on his face. He had a weapon attached to his leg and was dressed somewhat like somebody who knew how to use it. She wondered if he was like her. A hired killer. I wonder if anyone else I know got that this weird thing happen. Yor wasn't sure why, but she felt the blonde-haired guy was familiar. Something about him struck a chord with her. She smiled and leaned forward, not sure what to make of her gut feeling. Something was speaking at her to go and talk to the blonde, but she didn't want to be rude and bother somebody who seemed like he was busy. Click. Spew. Yor spewed her coffee out when the stranger's right arm clicked and malfunctioned. His fist dropped to the ground with a cable attaching the fist to a robot arm, and sparks started to shoot off of it. Naruto cursed. Fudging damn needy knew it was about time to get this thing tuned up. Naruto was disappointed when his arm malfunctioned and the part that kept his fist attached to his forearm malfunctioned and disconnected. Naruto was just glad it didn't launch like a rocket and embed itself in the concrete because that would have been unfortunate. He had skipped out on getting a tune-up because the mechanic he used was just a bit of a freak about trying to add a cannon to his arm. It was already hard to swim with a metal arm, he would be screwed if he ever got into the water with an arm that had a cannon in it. His arm was made of a super durable and heavy metal, and thanks to the grappling fist being compact technology, it was even heavier than it looked. Well, it looked like he was going to need that tune-up sooner than he expected. I'm sorry, sir, but it seems your hand. Yor was helpful and picked his hand up off of the ground. She saw him open a small hatch in his arm and start to manually wind his fist back up towards his forearm. Oh, it's a false arm. Yor realized when Naruto's hand left her grasp and reconnected with his arm. Yeah, usually I have full control of it, but it needs a tune-up to work properly. It still does what I wanted to, but the piece that keeps my fist connected to my forearm has seen some serious usage lately. Naruto clicked the piece back into place. He showed his hand was still working by moving his fingers around. Also, it is attached to my nervous bit if I get too relics I'd lose joint. Naruto took out a small tool and tied it up the joints between his hand and forearm. Tune up, that sounds so weird coming from a person. Yor smiled and spoke very pleasantly. Naruto nodded. He did a super dumb thing, thinking I was under some kind of illusion. I thought severe pain would wake me up, so I crushed my real arm and orbit arm. Naruto wasn't exactly happy with his own stupidity, but he could live with it. Yor nodded. I know. I recently believed that I was under government hypnosis, and I thought that if I had some emotional shock, that I would wake up, but when Yor censored herself from speaking of her recent murder of her parents. She covered her mouth and prevented the secret from coming out. Naruto was interested, turned to face her with a raised brow. Do you mind taking Laketwo steps back? Naruto asked her in a friendly tone. She took 2 steps back. Ash walks just like a female ninja, so maybe she is an assassin or something. Seems about my age, but she has the maturity of somebody a bit older. Naruto looked at her feet as she walked. She had the grace and purpose to her steps of a murderer or somebody trained in wasting no effort while walking. Thanks, and I understand completely. Well, if you have actually been accepted into Beacon, you have a weapon on your side. You going to Beacon too? Naruto saw her weapons at her leg. She was about his age, a trained warrior, and was carrying a weapon in public. It was pretty obvious that she was some kind of huntress. Oh, I just got accepted too. Maybe we will be in the same year, please. Treat me kindly as your fellow student. Yor was excited to meet somebody like her. He carried himself just like an assassin would. He wasted no movements at all when he walked, and even relaxed she could see there were no openings in his guard. He carried himself like a pro, somebody that she would be happy to hold a conversation with about killing. Perfect, well, I hope we can be friends. No, if you will excuse me, need to go get my arm checked out with a friend of mine. Naruto didn't consider this person much of a friend and more of a needed person in his life. If he could find a person who could do the tune-up and maintenance of his arm that was more sane, he would be extremely happy to get them on the job instead. Your arm? Yor asked to make sure. Yep, that is what I said. This is my scroll number. If you ever need somebody to take care of a problem, I'm your guy for a price. Naruto took a business card out of his arm and handed it right to her. They separated after that. What a good guy, reminds me so much of somebody in how he looks, but I don't remember why. Hope my brother is doing okay. Yor could only sigh. Seeing a healthy young man just made her think of her brother and how it had been 17 years since she had seen him. She missed him very dearly and hoped that he was doing okay without her. Maybe if I become a huntress, I can travel the world and try and find out what happened to me. Yor just had that idea. Now she was even more excited to become a huntress. 18 years. Well, the time didn't matter since she didn't exactly change once she reached her physical peak. Ilia von Einsborn was a short girl, only 133 centimeters tall, and despite being 18, she clearly didn't look like it. She had pale skin, pale white hair, and red eyes. She had managed to find a way to get her favorite outfit even in this world that didn't match up with her own world. She hated her world, but she loved the clothes that came from it. She hated a lot of things, like how she hated her original father and hated her little brother that he adopted. She loved very little, but once she was brought to this world she had been stripped of what she loved. Grrrr. She was currently surrounded by 20 Grimm, the evil creatures of this world. She hated the cold and she wanted to attend a school that was in a warmer climate but not super hot. So, her rich parents that she had each hated her parents in this world and had legally changed the name they gave her in this world to what her real name was. To say that put a rift between them was an understatement. She wanted to escape the cold, she hated Germany in her old world for its cold, and she hated Atlas in this world because she was still located right in the cold and snow again. 18 years was a long time though. Ilia plucked out 6 of her hairs and she activated her semblance. She infused her aura into the hair she plucked from her head and mentally shaped the hair into birds. They flew around her and protected her when a Grimm got too close to her. She tossed a small dust crystal into the air and one of her birds caught it. The bird transformed into a sword infused with a dust crystal in the hilt. The 20 Grimm were quickly mowed down as the sword flew through the air and cut them to pieces, while the birds around her protected her. I'm strong enough to leave Atlas, go to Beacon and you can just focus on your other children. Ilia looked up towards her parents, who were looking down at her from a safe place. Nothing would make her happier than to see their suffering faces, to watch as they begged for mercy. She sighed and wiped the thought from her head, since it wasn't like she could kill them and get away with it. They were rich, and them disappearing would become too much of a problem. I will settle for abandoning them. They already resent me for hating them. Ilia started to walk away. She assumed there were more like her. More people who didn't belong in this world because she had met and killed one of them before. It was just a person who had gone crazy and chanted to everyone that everything was wrong, that this wasn't his world. She killed him because she didn't want her parents getting suspicious of her, since he was spouting nonsense that was scarily close to how she experienced her childhood. Well, to say she killed him was wrong. She had him killed, she didn't do it herself. She liked this world more than her old world, but she hoped that she could get everything that she couldn't get in her old world. She had hoped that by being reborn, that maybe she could have been born to her real parents in this world. Once she got a good look at her parents in this world, she felt immense disappointment that they looked almost nothing like her old parents. She couldn't get a perfect life, but she could get a better one. Romance friendship kommer does he want them, and what better place than Beacon? Where I will have 3 hostages who are forced to live in a room with me for 4 years. Ilia wanted to go to Beacon because she wanted friendship and romance. She didn't care about saving lives as a huntress, she just wanted to get a captive audience. She wanted to become a huntress so that she could go to school and get 3 new friends and possibly romance with one of them. She wanted to have everything she couldn't have in her old world. Her parents in this world didn't let her make friends easily. They even attempted to get her into an arranged marriage with the Schnee boy, but that was when she legally changed her name and gave them a very strong word of disapproval. Her life was just now beginning. -1 week later. Her life was about to be over. Ilia was bleeding from the head and she was in a failing airship that had been attacked by Grimm on the way to Vale so that she could go to Beacon. Her aura had been broken when a hole was blown into the side of the airship and she was dazed. She didn't have access to her semblance with her aura broken, leaving her practically defenseless. The pilot was dead and they were on autopilot now. There wasn't much hope of survival at the moment now when she was staring down a Grimm that was currently inside of her airship. It had the head of the pilot in its mouth and had crushed 2 of the other passengers under its talons. With one swallow, it gulped down the pilot's head and she picked up the gun of the huntsman who had been sitting next to her. He had taken most of the brunt of the explosion that depleted her aura to nothing. The fist. The metal fist punched the Grimm in the face with a metal cable attached to the wrist. Ilia was given a reason to pause when the Grimm stumbled a few steps and fell out of the hole on the other side of the airship. The fist that hit the Grimm hit the floor and started to slide out of the airship before it opened up and grabbed the ledge. Ilia rushed over to the open hole in the airship and she saw another one. The rescue airship. Standing on top of the airship was the person who the fist was attached to and the cable tightened before it reeled the blonde-haired man in. He was launched right up towards her own airship and he landed right where the Grimm had been standing. Booth at work and Naruto looked around the severely damaged ship and whistled. Almost everyone was dead. He made eye contact with Ilia before he nodded and walked to the beep pit. He hissed when he saw the pilot was headless. He had heard the scanners report that an airship was being attacked by Grimm, so he hitched a ride on top of an airship that had been dispatched to rescue them. He had hitched a ride, so he wasn't actually part of the rescue operation. Ilia was enraptured. Naruto's hand clicked back into place on his arm and the wind was blowing his hair wildly. He was decently calm as he examined the situation and he nodded to her as if to assure her that everyone was okay. When the Grimm he punched landed back in the ship, he punched it right in the beak and killed it. His fist broke its beak and crushed its skull with one smooth motion. He looked back towards her before he grinned. "Ah dump. Well, at least the prettiest person on the ship survived, that is always a plusuke then. I'm here to rescue you, the name is Naruto, let's go." Naruto offered a hand to the girl. Boom. That changed when he grabbed her and shielded her with his body when another explosion rocked the ship and the entire front half of the ship exploded. Ilia was face to chest with him and she saw his golden aura break for a moment. It didn't take much longer before they were free-falling out of the air and she just gave a quick scream of panic. Only for a second. Naruto on the other hand never panicked as they started to fall, instead he held her tightly. He took aim with his arm and launched his hand right at another Grimm that was flying around the sky. Ilia figured out what he had done when they were pulled right towards the Grimm and they landed on its back. "I just want you to know, if my aura hadn't broken, I would have been able to save myself and kill all of these Grimm," Ilia stated to Naruto, noticing that he still had an arm around her. The flying Grimm was trying to knock them off of its back. Naruto grabbed his dagger and clicked it a few times and the blade came out. The edge of the dagger glowed orange before he slashed the creature's head off. Naruto hooked onto the next Grimm and he yanked his arm, moving his dagger to his mouth. He pulled on the next flying Grimm hard enough that it collided with another Grimm. The two Grimm were both hit by a falling piece of Ilia's airship and killed. Though, now Ilia and Naruto were falling in freefall once more. Naruto's arm clicked when his hand attached once more and he took aim at the rescue ship. Click BZZZZT. Fudging damn it. Naruto had his arm lock up. "Woman, can you swim?" Naruto asked the girl who he was holding. They were about to have a very wet landing since he still hadn't gotten his arm tuned up and it just failed on him. The gear that allowed his arm to function as a grappling hook just failed on him, which was very bad for them. "I'm from Atlas, the water there is freezing cold and I've never swam before in my life." "Ah okay then, I guess a wet landing won't cut it since I'm not the strongest swimmer with this arm." "Okay, water landing is a no-go." Naruto grinned when she told him she couldn't swim. Naruto held his dagger and clicked it several times before the edge of the dagger started to glow a dark purple color. Naruto flung the dagger up and stabbed the inside of the roof of the rescue airship, having managed to score a direct hit into the open side of the ship. Naruto took an extra vial of gravity dust he had before he crushed it in his palm. He and Ilia started to slow down, his fist was glowing the same color as the blade of his dagger. Then, as the airship passed over them, they started to get dragged up high into the air. Brilliant. Naruto attached his knife to the inside of the ship with gravity dust and then used a vial of the same dust to pull them towards the ship. The two of them landed inside the rescue ship and Naruto grabbed the handle of his short sword. He yanked it out of the ship's ceiling and the dagger-sized blade went back into the hilt. Naruto holstered his weapon. "Well, it was exiting and sorry for hitching a ride, here this girl is the only survivor on the airship and with that, off I go." Naruto jumped out of the open airship side once Ilia was safe with the rescue team. "Hey. You frontus bastard, don't just hitch a ride on our airship and do our jobs. Get back here." "Hehehe." Ilia giggled to herself when she saw the rescue team actually got mad that somebody did their jobs for them. "And he appears close to my age, this will be fun." "Naruto, his name is Naruto, huh?" Ilia repeated the name that he had told her. "The Kingdom of Vale." Other than the weather, she was glad that she found something that she enjoyed. She couldn't wait to track down this Naruto guy. "Oh come on, I'm 17, just give me something to drink, something besides water or juice, or said I need a beer." He didn't know what was worse. Being an adult in a world where vampires and night creatures were constantly threatening human life, while being old enough to get drunk, or living in a world where Grimm were constantly threatening human life, but being 17 and thus not quite old enough to drink whenever he wanted to drink. Trevor Belmont. The tall and gruff teenage man, patchy and not well-groomed facial hair with brown hair. He wore dark and uncolorful clothes, his entire outfit blended well with the night, except for two things about his outfit that screamed look at me to the naked eye. The first was the red cape that he had tied around his shoulders and the second was the bright red cape he had tied around his waist that went down the back of his legs. He liked to accept his outfits with red, sue him. "I think you better get out." "Come on, I'm almost 18, you can just give me a little, just enough to get me plastered just a little." Trevor was practically begging the man for a drink. "I'm about to go to war, I need a last drink." Stuff it, this bar only serves huntsmen and those allowed to drink. Tell me when you become one of those, then we'll see about getting you something. Huntsman Affine. Trevor had been avoiding it. He was older than 17 in this life, but 5 years ago he had awakened his memories of his real life. He remembered everything up until the point he was about 19. He was happy there were no vampires in this world, but he was unhappy that the Grimm existed and they were just night creatures but less intelligent. He wanted a peaceful life of drinking, fucking, and sleeping in warm beds belonging to the women he faked, but now it seemed he would really have to get work. The huntsman seemed his best bet since it was related to what he did in his last life. Days later. Thank you for your purchase here, let me explain how it works. It's a whip and a morning star, you know how they work. Trevor had paid to have a weapons dealer make some custom weapons for him. It was simple, he just wanted a durable whip that could handle being used in weird ways. He also wanted a metal morning star. Hey, where are the spikestas is supposed to have spikes? Trevor stated as he pointed to his morning star. The dealer scoffed and picked up the whip. The bold end of the chained whip had holes in it, but on the other end was a handle. The man tapped the side of it and a vial or dust came out. The man loaded it back into the handle of the whip before he showed a switch on the handle. He pressed the button and the chain itself glowed slightly. Glowing orange spikes came out of the holes on the morning star. Combustion dust, you hit something while holding the switch, boom explosion, and no more looking at what you hit with it. You have to keep your thumb on this button to keep it activated. 1 vial of dust is worth 5 explosions. The man stated as he took his thumb off of the button and the dust was sucked back into the weapon. He also showed off the leather whip. This is coated in burn dust, it can cause minor to severe burns when you hit with it. But Goody knew exactly how you made these. Trevor didn't understand what the difference between burn and combustion dust was. He was still trying to figure out how a lot of this world worked since his memories pretty much erased the memories of him from this world. He had spent a year or two learning this world's written and spoken languages and avoiding any Grimm he came across. Also, he documented every Grimm he came across so that he could kill them if needed. Also, since you asked. Here is a short sword, 3 throwing knives, and a throwing axe. The total comes out to this much lean. The man showed the rest of the equipment that he had ready for Trevor. This stuff was just basic equipment and didn't need to be custom made. They wouldn't be the most effective weapons in the average warrior's hands. Trevor looked at the bill. Can you put it on my tab? I can cut your slime throat out with this axe. The man grabbed onto Trevor's cloak and Trevor just raised his hands up in surrender. I can pay, he was just wondering, don't you want a regular customer? I will need refills and sharpenings and I will need more custom orders in the future. So I believe developing a working relationship would be best. Trevor stopped when he saw a blonde-haired man come into the shop. Soup, is she in the back? Yeah, the woman is in the back, you were late for your tune-up, Naruto. The man stated as he let go of Trevor and Naruto looked between the dealer and Trevor for a second. Naruto looked down at all of the weapons on the table. Trevor looked at the 9 tails Naruto had with a raised eyebrow before he looked at Naruto again. You're one of those faunus. Trevor just said it as a fact. Animal people, something he wasn't used to. Non-humans and humans getting along peacefully as they had been at least, was unusual to him. Trevor saw that Naruto's right arm was robotic and he felt no sympathy. He could look at Naruto and tell the man was a warrior. No doubt he lost it in battle, so there was no need to pity him. Meh, I guess you're one of those humans, but yeah, faunus. Naruto had casual conversation with the man. He did not want to go into the back of the store and get his tune-up. Getting a tune-up? Yeah, it sucks. I have to make sure that she doesn't put anything weird in my arm. If I don't keep a constant eye on her, she will put a cannon or some kind of gun or a parachute in my arm. That woman does not understand the value of keeping it simple. Naruto. Naruto raised a hand and saluted the man. Trevor Belmont, of the House Belmont. Never heard of a Belmont, well Trevor hated the cape. Trevor had squeezed the handle of the morning star and he caught his cloak on fire. Do you know things? Trevor stopped trying to stomp out the fire when Naruto did him the favor of unsheathing his sword. Naruto created a cold mist with a swing of his dagger and blew it onto the fire as it started. Thankfully, only the edge of red cape was singed. No problem, wish me luck. Naruto grabbed his arm and removed the robot arm. He wouldn't need it on his body for the tune-up. I'll buy you a drink sometime. No thanks, I'm not a drunk. Being drunk is one of my few pleasures in life, but I need to become a huntsman to drink before the legal age. Well, then sign up for Beacon. I'm actually about to head there later myself. Naruto walked into the back room with that said. He saluted Trevor again sarcastically, using the robot arm he was holding. Naruto. Do you know how late you are? To show me how sorry you are, you should let me install this new idea I have for a flamethrower into your arm. Woman. If I catch any whiff of you putting a flamethrower into my arm, I am going to shot my robot arm up your ass. I am not playing with Yaoi. Are you trying to make my arm even heavier? Trevor whistled awkwardly as he grabbed the weapons off of the counter and he made a strategic retreat, like the dealer was distracted by the shouting going on in the back. Hey. I promise, I will pay you back one day, maybe soon, maybe later. Trevor got away with the weapons. Beacon. It was where Naruto was currently located and he had just finished listening to the world's shortest and least encouraging speech of all time by Professor Ozpin, a man who gave off vibes to him. He had a locker assigned to him to keep his clothes, armor, and weapons in until tomorrow, when he would go through the placement test that would assign him to a team for his 4 years at Beacon. It helped that Naruto didn't have a lot of luggage he brought to school, since he mostly made a living as a traveling mercenary instead of staying in one location long term. The school was very well made. Of course, Naruto had already scooped the school out for the most part and learned the layout purely to sate his own curiosity. This included, but was not limited, to going to the city building records and looking up a map of the layout, which was public knowledge in the records. The map wasn't updated enough to be super accurate, but it was decently accurate from what he had seen. There were 3 dorm buildings. One for first years. One for second years. Finally, the third and fourth years shared the same dorms. There was a dining building, which served breakfast, lunch, and dinner for all of the students at the school. Naruto was going to be sneaking into that building quite a bit for midnight snacks whenever he got the craving for some trouble. The library was nearby the dining building and was attached to the classes building, which was connected to the main tower that led up to Ozpin's office, which was at the tippy top of the tower. There was the training arena attached to the other side of the classes building. Funny story, the dorms all had shared showers, which were not connected to the dorm rooms themselves. Yet, somehow the rooms themselves had toilet rooms connected to them, which was kind of funny that the bathing rooms weren't in the personal rooms, but the restrooms were in the personal rooms. Poof. Hehehe. Naruto laughed when he finished brushing one of his many tails, and the fur poofed out on it, being very fluffy. Naruto took very good care of his tails. It would be a disrespect to Kurama's memory to not take care of his QB tails, though they were just normal fox tails, he did have 9 of them to take care of. He was sure that Kurama would yell at him if he ever allowed his tails to fall into a state of mess. Why, hello Mr. Stranger. Why, hello Miss Stranger. Naruto greeted the woman who set her pillow down next to his. All of the students were going to be sleeping in sleeping bags in the same room, the first years who didn't have their own rooms. Men and women, Faunus and human, all of them were mixed together at the moment and wearing their pajamas. There was a lot of eye candy in the room and a lot of nervous people too. Naruto was not among the nervous people because he sat in a shirt and his boxers without a care in the world, just brushing his tails. Robot arm disconnected from his body and laying next to his pillow. Yor had a book. She only put her pillow next to him since she knew his face and his name. She felt a bit more comfortable sleeping next to him than she did the people who she didn't know even the tiniest bit. They didn't have much of a conversation after greeting each other. Yor started to read her book and she was dressed in extremely conservative pajamas, a gown that went down to her ankles. It was actually a pretty comfortable silence since they didn't have much to talk about. So it is your book about? Naruto asked Yor, breaking the comfy silence. He gave a small smile when he looked at her book. It was a book that he recognized. The tale of an utterly gutsy shinobi, a new book that was suggested to me by a local bookseller. I'm only in the 2nd chapter but it is a compelling story. Yor explained the book to him. He smiled at her compliment of the book. She smiled when she saw him smiling and she offered the book towards him. Would you like to read it when I finish? Yor offered to him. He raised his hand and waved her off. Oh, I've got that book memorized. You could say there isn't anyone on this world who knows that book better than me. Naruto wasn't ashamed to brag to her. She just nodded and smiled, not arguing with him over his bragging. They went back into a comfortable silence as the teenagers all around them talked. Some of them showed off their warrior bodies to each other by flexing. Some flirted with girls, some girls flirted back with them. Those guys over there are trying to get your attention. Yor looked over to a guy who flirted with her, with a wink. She just smiled and waved to him, but she waved in a way that kindly let him down. I don't know those guys as well as I do you. So are you sitting so far out of the way from everyone else? Yor had only even noticed Naruto because she saw him sitting in the corner of the room like an outcast. The last tail poofed. I'm a mutant Faunus and other Faunus don't exactly feel comfortable around me, let alone the humans. Also, my tails take up a lot of room and I am not the most polite of sleepers. Just thought I would stay out of the way and I'm not alone. Naruto changed his position so that Yor could see who was on his other side. It was Trevor. Trevor was passed out drunk as a skunk. Yes, Trevor had managed to get his hands on enough booze to make him pass out cold. Naruto had found Trevor already passed out and sleeping like this, so Naruto just decided to sleep next to him so that nobody else messed with the man. Who is he? Don't know his name, but I met him in passing. He's so passed out drunk, even if I whack the side of his head in my sleep, there is no way he would wake up. Naruto grinned as he spoke. He didn't just pick the man because he didn't want him to be bothered, but he picked him exactly because he was passed out drunk. The man was already sleeping so heavily that conversation next to him wasn't waking him up. I see, well, I've never had a sleepover before, so this is kind of exciting. Hey, Naruto, a very pretty girl is staring at you. Yor stated as she noticed the feeling of somebody staring. She looked for the source, and she saw a girl of moonlit beauty just staring at Naruto. The second Naruto looked up and towards her though, she instantly laid down and made herself invisible among the crowd of people. She had been caught and hid. I mean, I'm a bit of a freak, not weird for people to stare. On the bright side though, I don't have to worry about anyone stealing this. Naruto lifted up his disconnected arm before he gently put it down. Yor picked it up. She blinked. This is heavy, Yor noted, and that was saying something if even she felt it was heavy. She had much greater raw strength than most around her, to the point she couldn't properly control her strength at times. She could still easily lift it, but the fact that she even noticed it was heavy at all showed just how little of a chance somebody had of stealing it. Naruto's jaw dropped for a moment when Yor picked up his arm as easily as he picked it up, since he didn't expect anyone else to be able to lift it like him. Yor put his arm down gently. So you don't sleep with it on? Yor asked. He mean no, I don't sleep with it on. Too dangerous and way too comfortable. Go ahead and lie down and then put this on your chest. Naruto offered her as he picked it up and handed it to her. She laid down on her back and accepted his arm before she placed it across her chest, between her breasts. Her chance changed to discomfort. I would never be able to sleep like this, it makes it hard to breathe. Yor sat up and put it back down. She could easily imagine rolling over and instantly waking up because he rested his hand on the wrong part of his body. I understand, well, good night. Yor placed her book into the box next to her pillow. What is in the box? Naruto asked her as he laid down too. It was about time for bed, lights were going out. Oh, you know. Naruto used his right eye to blink to Yor, and she caught what he did almost instantly. Yor blinked back to him and he just raised a finger to his lips and showed that he wasn't going to say it out loud while they had people around them. Yor nodded to him thankfully, since just like how she could guess he was some kind of assassin like her, she figured he could guess the same about her. She was glad to know that somebody who was like her knew her secret, otherwise she would have to silence him. Thankfully he was a lot like she was, so she didn't have to worry about him spilling the beans. When the last candle lights went out in the room, some black-haired girl with a book, that was the time everyone went to bed. There was a big day in the morning. What was a landing strategy? The landing strategy was how a huntsman would land on the ground after being dropped out of an airship. It was a routine and common occurrence for every huntsman to have their own way to safely land after jumping out of a moving aircraft. It was the safest way for them to get to their mission site safely without risking the airship crew in the process. Thus, it made absolute sense for Beacon to test to see which of their students could properly land when being launched off a cliff. Naruto found the act very refreshing. Ah, this reminds me of my time under Jiraiya, only this time my landing plan won't include a toad. Naruto thought as he sailed higher and higher into the air. He had been launched off a cliff into the Emerald Forest with a mission objective and a side objective. The mission objective was to collect a relic hidden in the ruins of the Emerald Forest and make it back alive, and the side objective was to make contact with another student. The first student he made eye contact with would be his partner. Naruto didn't care who he was partnered with, he was the type who could try and get along with anyone. The only person with a name he knew was Yor, and while he would be fine with being her partner, had to admit the idea wasn't quite as appealing as other students, but he wouldn't mind being her partner. She was clearly skilled and powerful, but the fact she was an assassin was a bit of an issue. Naruto had a lot of time to think about it. He had about 3 seconds before he reached the height of his launch, and then another 12 seconds before he hit the ground. That was plenty of time for him to consider where he wanted to land in the forest. He had even more time than that if he wanted to use his semblance, or if he made use of some of his wind dust to slow his fall even more. He had plenty of options, so Naruto would rather use this chance to check out the other students. Let's see, I'll grade them on a scale of D to S. I'll try and land in the same area of the forest as the people who get the highest grades. Naruto thought to himself as he unsheathed his dagger. He switched it to ice dust and spun it around above his head, releasing bits of dust. Naruto created a platform of ice about an inch thick and he stabbed his weapon into it. He clicked his weapon several times before he switched to gravity dust. Naruto flipped himself to the top of the platform and stabbed his weapon into the ice. Then, it started to float on its own with him on it, but it was slowly starting to crack under his weight. Group 1. CBC. It was 4 boys landing around the same part of the forest, the part of the forest that was closest to the ruins. Their landing strategies were rather plain and showed a completely average level of skill. Only one of them showed more than average skill, but he was just on the upper end of the average scale. Naruto changed where he was looking and looked towards the next group of people who had gotten launched. Group 2. SDBA. The red-haired warrior girl landed with utmost skill and perfection, and she threw her weapon to save the life of a poor boy. Well, he sucked so hard at landing that he would have died were it not for her. There was a bright girl with orange hair who brute forced her landing, but she didn't hurt herself and made creative use of her hammer to get herself as close to possible as a boy with black hair. He had managed to get a create landing as well. Good skill in that group, he wouldn't mind getting any of them as partners except for the boy who couldn't land on his own. Group 3. AAA. The group with the highest average he had seen so far, with a lot of skill and creativity to their landings. The brunette with red tints haired girl who turned into roses for a brief moment before she used her scythe to slow herself more. There was a black-haired girl who showed cat-like reflexes and landing ability, who just had extremely high natural agility. The white-haired created some kind of platforms to hop off of and had fine grace. Finally, a blonde-haired girl who soared through the air by flying with the use of explosive gauntlets. Group 4. SB. Naruto saw Yor land in the forest with such grace and ease that you could see that she didn't even worry about it. She did it all with her own body and didn't use a single gimmick to her landing. There was no stress, which gave her the same ranking as the armored red-haired girl. The other S was the white-haired girl he saved. She had ripped out some hair and formed some familiars, and she stood on the backs of those very familiars. She turned one of them into a sword that she stood on, and the other ones provided more support for the sword. She got an S because it was something that no lack of skill could ruin for her. With Yor. No gimmicks or tricks. Yor simply grabbed a branch on her way down and like an athlete, she skated down it, spun around, before she stabbed her weapons into the tree itself. She spiraled down the tree trunk with ease and landed with no trouble. Yor nodded to herself when her heels touched the grass. Okay, out of 10, I would only rank 3 other people at 10. There is Naruto, who is overlooking us all from that ice platform, there is the red-haired girl who executed a perfect landing, and then there is the white-haired girl who is riding those bird things. Yor had managed to keep her eye on all of the other students. She looked to where they were landing and judged where she wanted to land based purely off where her best possible partner would land. Naruto and the white-haired girl had yet to land, but the red-haired girl was out of the question because she was most likely going to partner up with the blonde boy she saved. She only landed in this part of the forest because she broke down the likely areas that each group of people would land in. The smallest score she would accept for a partner she wanted to target was 8.5, and that was the least she needed. She landed in this part of the forest because Naruto was floating above it and so was the white-haired girl. There was also the guy who passed out drunk, but he had only scored an 8 on her scale of scores. She would rather not partner up with him, if only because his facial hair was kind of patchy and uneven. If he shaved his facial hair to trim it back or go clean shaven until he could grow a proper beard, she wouldn't mind him. Yor looked up at the sky. Naruto was still judging where he wanted to land. With Trevor. The freaking landing strategist is insane, throwing me off a cliff with no warning. Trevor used his whip at the last second to swing from a tree branch. He slowed himself down by swinging his morning star and getting it wrapped around a different tree. He slowed himself down considerably, but still stumbled a little when he landed on his feet. He didn't fall to his face, but it was hard for him when he still hit the ground with a good amount of force. He was well built, but he wasn't supernaturally strong or fast, he was just well built and had a lot of knowledge on killing creatures. If he judged his landing, he would give himself an acceptable. He didn't do horribly, but he would say he had a lot of room to improve himself. He tried to land as close to the ruins as he could to finish the test as fast as possible. He hoped he didn't have to do that a lot in the future, especially in a place where there weren't a lot of trees. He only regained his memories 5 years previously and still hadn't discovered what his semblance in this world was and wasn't very well versed in using aura for anything other than protecting his body and weapon. Trevor hunched forward and started to move towards the ruins. He stopped. No hangover, but after that fall, I've got to piss like a sailor. Trevor walked over towards a tree. He unzipped and whipped it out. Trevor loved nothing more than a good piss after a good drink. He had been in such a rush in the morning that he didn't have the chance to go to the bathroom before heading to the cliff. The attractive blonde-haired girl who wore the tiny booty shirts the night previously walked out of the bushes with her partner. Trevor pissed on her shoe when he turned to face her. Dude. Trevor dodged a punch the girl threw at him. Cat-like reflexes. Trevor had dodged her, but he then proceeded to get sucker punched by the black-haired girl right to the side of his chin. When he had dodged the blonde girl, he had so happened to dodge in a way that he ended up also pissing on the shoes of the black-haired girl. Shit, okay then, since I guess we're going Thysiel, have you know that I'm Trevor Belmont of the House Belmont and I'm not afraid to fight dirty. Trevor dodged another 2 punches from the blonde girl, and when she got too close, he responded with the best way he had. He hit her in the crotch with his knee. Ooh-oh. The girl stepped back and covered her crotch in pain, her anger over getting pissed on eased by the pain. You dirty. Ooh-oh. Trevor leaned forward when the black-haired girl got him in the testicles from behind with a knee as well. Sadly for him, the blonde girl recovered much faster than he did from the kick to the crotch. Okay, apologize for pissing on you twabut. In my defense, I feel I should shut up for my own health. Trevor realized he was making a mistake. The black-haired girl was sneaky and the situation was 2-on-1. Time to take the loss and move on. I heard trouble, Naruto, oh where is my lovely hero? Ilia landed nearby where she heard the sounds of fighting and trouble, expecting Naruto to be located there. She sighed in disappointment when she made eye contact with Trevor on the ground, holding his balls. She realized the 2 girls who put him on the ground were walking off towards the creek nearby, leaving her alone with the downed man. Ilia just became very disappointed when she realized not only was it not her hero, but it was a guy with his beep in his hands. Ilia got rid of her familiars and realized that there was no getting out of this. Ilia Vonins Burntless, put that away so we can get this over with. Ilia just started to walk away and expected Trevor to follow her. He did. He got up and put his beep away before he started to follow her. The red-caped boy and white-haired girl teamed up. With Yor jumped. She jumped because Naruto landed right on the ground next to her. He dropped right out of the sky when she wasn't looking. Naruto landed in a crouch before he stood up and dusted his knees off. Sup, looks like everyone has their partners, know, or most people do. I figured, hey, we're both pretty awesome, so why not us 2 team up? Naruto stated with a grin, standing up all the way. Yor nodded her head with a small smile, she clapped her hands together a few times. He extended his hand to her in a fist bump. Yor grabbed his fist and shook his hand instead of bumping fists with him, and he just made a very confused face at her. He shrugged his shoulders at her awkwardness. So you were just going to partner up with anyone? Yor asked as the 2 of them started to run towards the ruins. They jumped into the trees and started to hop from branch to branch, making faster progress. Actually, I was grading everyone on a scale from D to S, and I wanted to land in the part of the forest with the most people who earned a higher total score. I figured it would be better to be teamed with people closer to my awesomeness. Naruto didn't have an issue being honest. Yor nodded. Actually, I landed in this part of the forest myself because I noticed you and the other girl were here. I ranked people on a scale from 1 to 10 and there were only 4 people in this entire forest who ranked a 10 like me. It is better to be with people on your skill level, a team is only as strong as the weakest link. Yor agreed with him. Naruto didn't agree with her last statement, but he still nodded in overall agreement. Grim, looks like beholds. On it. Yor dropped out of the trees and stuck her weapons through the skulls of both Grim before the 3rd Grim even realized what was happening. By the time it did realize what had happened, Naruto came in from behind and chopped its head off. With that done, the 2 of them jumped back into the trees and started to head to the ruins again. They continued to jump for several minutes. So, teams are 4-person team show, is that decided? Yor asked him. She actually knew the answer. I talked to some older students and they used the relics to decide. There are enough matching pairs of relics. Each team of 2 grabs one and then the 2 teams who grab the same matching pair are teamed up. Whoa, in here I thought I was the only one who spoke to the older students. It looks like we both see the value in gathering information, Ursa. Yor stated as she saw 4 large bears ahead of them. She saw Naruto threw his kurama towards the grim bears and when it hit the ground under them turned into sand. Naruto jumped ahead of her and grabbed an Ursa by the neck, broke its neck while it was unsteady in the sand. He threw the disappearing corpse at another Ursa and picked up his sword and beheaded the 2 closest to him. Yor caught up at that moment and kicked the Ursa in the spine and the bear folded into 2, collapsing in on itself and dying. They got back to the trees and started to run towards the relics again. I mean, we do come from similar backgrounds. So let me ask you something, would it be weird if I said that one day as a baby, I woke up in this body with memories of another me? Naruto asked Yor to test the waters. She stumbled in the air but caught herself and kept jumping. She shook her head. You would sound crazy if you weren't speaking to me. I woke up the same way, seems I was right, I'm not the only person. So how old were you, how old are your memories? Yor asked him, pure curiosity. Well, I have clear memories to around the time I was 17 but I feel I was older than that, but I have fuzzy memories of myself a little older than that. Further I get from 17 in memories, the fuzzier it gets. About the same about even though I know I should be older, I still feel like I did when I was 17. It feels weird, right? Yeah, it really does. So it feels so good to tell somebody this. I've been mentally trapped as a 17-year-old for 17 years. He should be mentally 34, but I still feel like I'm 17 since my body never aged. I don't feel like I ever aged. It feels weird, right? Naruto asked her this time, and she nodded her head with a cute smile. It really does. I understand you. A small flock of Nevermore were destroyed when Naruto and Yor killed them without even breaking their conversation this time. They continued their conversation until they got to the ruins. They walked to all of the pieces. Heh. King piece. Naruto grabbed the piece from the ruins. Yor nodded. They were the first people to arrive, meaning they had beat all of the other students in getting to the ruins. With their piece secured, both Naruto and Yor ran back towards the forest so they could get back to the cliff that would take them back to Beacon. At the cliff. Oh my, this two are a cut above all the rest. Glinda Goodwitch stated as she looked at the live feed on her scroll. She watched the two students casually slaughtering every grim they encountered in the blink of an eye, without even letting them distract them from their conversation. The two worked together seamlessly, both covering each other perfectly. They each got a relic in record time. No student before them had gotten a relic as fast as them, and even now they were going to break the other record for students who got back to the cliff fastest. They both showed the skills of warriors who had years and years of experience. She would love to hear what they were talking about, but they were moving through the forest too fast for her to really catch what they were saying before she had to switch cameras. There they were. On the video feed, she watched as Naruto gave Yor a lift, placing his hands together and tossing her up halfway to the top of the cliff when combined with her own impressive jumping skills. Yor caught his fist when he launched it at her, and with a strong yank, she sent him higher up into the air than her. Naruto landed in front of Ozpin and Glinda. Naruto reeled in his fist, and Yor came along with it. 21 minutes and 5 seconds. He beat the old record by hours, and not a scratch on them. Glinda was stunned when she saw the two walk right by them. Glinda looked at their aura, and she saw that they hadn't even taken a hit to their aura. Here you go, sir. Naruto passed the king chess piece to Ozpin. Ozpin accepted it with a graceful nod. These two really are in a class of their own. It doesn't feel like they are students, it feels like they are extremely skilled veterans. Ozpin felt weird when he saw the two students who for all intents and purposes were decades above where they should be for their age. He didn't know what to say to them. The girl, she has such kind eyes. She doesn't have the eyes of a warrior, and the boy, his eyes are filled with love and affection. They have the skills of people who should have cold eyes. Ozpin didn't know how to talk to either student. You see, the great part about ramen is that it can be whatever flavor you want to make it. It's a perfect dish with infinite combinations and variety. Ozpin let out a sigh of relief. I see, and can you cook it? I would love to try it myself sometime. I'm not the best cook, but I think I could manage to make some ramen. It won't be as good as what the old man makes, but I'm sure you like it. For all their skill, they really are just normal kids. Ozpin felt immense relief. Their genuine conversation and ability to talk to each other with open hearts showed that they really weren't hiding some sinister secret. Both of the teens were just as he thought, teens with more skill than years on them. They were genius-level huntsmen, nothing less and nothing more. The blonde boy and black-haired girl were officially partners. A single candle. The very first meeting of the newly formed team meet. After the first test had been completed and all of the students made it back, there was a big and boring ceremony where all of the teams who got matching pieces were assigned to each other. They were also assigned bedrooms, and the key codes to those rooms were put on their scrolls. The most notable groups to be named were Team RWBY, Team JNPR, and Team Krill, teams that weren't their team least. Naruto Uzumaki, assigned leader. Ilia von Einsburn. Yor Brier. Trevor Belmont. That was Team Neat, also Team Night as their code name. The K for the first meeting of Team Night, a midnight meeting, seems about right. Now, let's honestly introduce ourselves. Naruto crossed his arms and looked at Yor, Ilia, and Trevor, since they all had the same eyes as him. He could tell he had come across a couple of people who had been dropped in this world before. He could recognize them when he made prolonged eye contact with them. The name is Naruto Uzumaki, and I woke up as a baby with memories of my previous life as a possibly 17-year-old shinobi. I'm a war veteran and a bit of a goofball. Naruto introduced himself first. Oh? The FFFFFFT. Trevor spit his booze out right at Naruto's face in shock, since Naruto had just admitted to something exceedingly startling. He looked at his bottle with a frown. I shouldn't have done that. Trevor had wasted perfectly good beer by spitting it out. He looked to his partner Ilia, who seemed shocked but was taking him at face value. Her only reaction had been that, oh, after all. The war veteran and a ninja at that. I knew you were like me, but I guess our professions were closer than I thought. I'm Yor Brier, and I worked as an assassin in my previous life. Yor introduced herself and her previous occupation. Trevor stopped himself from spitting his beer out a second time while Ilia slowly nodded her head. She was starting to see a theme and she looked at Trevor, expecting him to introduce himself next. She wanted to go last personally so that she could customize her introduction to be more impressive. Trevor Belmont, House Belmont and I hunted vampires and the other creepy crawlies of the night. Trevor got a round of applause from Naruto and Yor. Vampires exist? Yor was shocked. In my world they did, and what about you midget? Trevor asked Ilia. She huffed at the nickname. Ilia von Einsborn, and I am a genetically superior creation by my family. I was around 18 before I got this body, and I am 18 again, so I am older than the rest of you. I might be a midget, but please do not assume that I am a child. Ilia stated, and she looked towards Naruto. Trevor raised an eyebrow when he saw the look she was sending him and how she made sure she looked right into his eyes when she stated she wasn't a child. So, Naruto, tell me more about yourself. I do owe you my life, so I would love to see about repaying you for that. Oh, you saved her life. That was nice of you. Yor clapped in appreciation of the kind act. Well, she could have saved herself if the explosion that damaged her ship hadn't knocked out her aura, but I did try and help where I could. If you really want to thank me, Ilia, why not just smile more often? Naruto didn't need an actual thanks for helping her. If she was happy, then he was happy. Ilia was disappointed. He could have asked for anything, be it sexual, romantic, or even just help with something. I would have preferred a romantic request. Ilia deadpanned internally while smiling. She looked at Trevor when he stood up and walked towards the door. Bada piss, you three continue this without. Trevor was stopped when Naruto grabbed the back of his shirt and pulled him back into a seated position. Trevor accepted his seated position and looked at Naruto. Naruto smiled at him, but his smile was a bit creepier this time. But I guess pissing can wait. So what is next on this little meeting? Trevor asked Naruto with a smile. As team leader, the first thing we're going to do is get us all on the same wavelength. Which is why everyone here is going to be writing down all of our abilities and how they work, right here. Also, write down any notable skills you have. Naruto showed he was sitting on 4 notebooks. He pulled them out from under him and tossed them to everyone. Yor and Trevor caught the notebooks easily, even the pens right after. The notebook he tossed to Ilia landed in her lap when she raised to catch it with her hands. Soliquat Yor was a little confused. Write down how you fight and write down any skills you have, her weaknesses. We should know this kind of stuff about each other, like, who here can cook? Naruto asked as he looked around. Yor raised her hand before she instantly lowered her hand with shame. Ilia didn't even bother raising her hand while Trevor half raised his hand. Naruto was the only one to fully raise his hand. So, if we are ever camping in the woods, it will be me and Trevor doing the cooking, since Yor and Ilia can't cook. Naruto noted, since that skill would help him divide up labor in the future. Ooh, oh, he get it now, makes more sense. Ilia could see the value in having a written list of all of their skills and abilities, and their weaknesses as well. I have a question. Were you a Fronis in your last life, or are the tales new? The tales are new, but they are very ironic. You see, when I was a newborn baby, I was the human sacrifice of a giant Cubon 9-tailed fox, and it was put inside me. The irony is that it made my life a living hell, and now in this world I have 9 tails and it is making my life a living hell again. Naruto complained. Like, do you know how much effort it takes to keep them all fluffy and clean? Naruto complained about that. Trevor caught how Naruto downplayed his own suffering. He was most likely discriminated against by humans for being a Fronis and discriminated by other Fronis as well for being a mutant. I won't say anything. Trevor could see that Naruto had downplayed his own suffering so that Yor and Ilia wouldn't be too concerned about him. If Naruto was going to downplay it, then he wasn't going to bring it up either. I think your tails are cute. Please don't call a grown man cute, the correct term is handsome. His tails are very handsome. Ilia corrected Yor, purely for the sake of correcting her. They are adorable tails, but these two get along a little too well for my comfort and both of them are trained killers. They have so much to bond over. Ilia was going to try and not let them grow too much closer. She called dibs. Trevor whistled as he started to write his skills down. Seems Yor is naturally friendly and Ilia has a thing for Naruto and sees her as competition. This is going to be fun. I'm not going to get involved in the romantic stuff here. Trevor looked at the way Ilia looked at Naruto and the friendly way Naruto and Yor talked to each other. Shared traits did help people bond and Naruto and Yor both had a shared past as trained murderers. I should sneak her and hire a prostitute ladder and go get a bottle of wine, some hard stuff. Trevor finished off his drink and frowned. Should write down our abilities from our old world too? Ilia asked. No, don't bother. I'm going to guess that if you are like me, you are missing most of your old abilities. I am missing a lot of my old abilities. Ilia had a semblance that was just like one of her old abilities, but she was missing most of her other powers in exchange for it. So, and are we going to sort out beds? Ilia looked at the 4 beds in the room. She wanted to claim the bed next to Naruto so that she could more realistically sneak into his bed at night. She heard a laugh and she turned to glare at Trevor for daring to catch on to what she was doing. She could see that he knew what she was planning, so she glared at him to keep silent. Let's just go from left to right, according to Team He, so I'll take the far left, Trevor will take the far right, and Ilia will be next to me, and Yor will be next to Trevor. Any complaints? Naruto asked, because he really didn't care which bed he slept in. He also didn't care who he slept next to, seeing as they had plenty of space in the room. The rooms were given more than enough space to hold them, their beds, and the desks and bookshelves provided for them in the room. There was also a large dresser with 4 compartments for each of them to store their clothes in. Only a bunch of idiots would somehow manage to not be able to make this amount of space work for them. No problems here. Yor was like Naruto, she didn't mind having her bed next to Trevor's bed. It wasn't like they were sharing a bed after all. She was already going to feel awkward just because she was sharing a room with 2 boys anyway, so who she slept next to didn't even register on that scale anymore. Trevor shrugged, since he didn't care at all where he slept. I love this arrangement, I really do. I always love having the second leftmost bed in any given room. Ilia had a twinkle in her eye when she approved of the bed assignments. That is very specific. Yor was confused by how specific Ilia enjoyed her bed placement to be. Trevor snorted, because Yor was being genuine. She genuinely didn't catch on to the fact that Ilia was lusting after the team leader. He looked at Naruto, who was just like Yor, and somehow didn't catch on to the fact Ilia had plans either. You know what, I actually like this midget, she's just a bunch of bottled up sexual tension, and I am going to enjoy watching her schemes. Trevor smirked at Ilia. She was perhaps the most wicked and lustful of them all, and she had already selected her target for her lust and affection. Sodium leader, tell me, since you were a war veteran, how is that going to play into how you lead the team? Trevor asked with a sarcastic smirk. Naruto smiled. The next morning. Trevor's smirk was gone. Oh come on son, isn't even up, this is cruel and unusual punishment. Trevor complained as he followed after Naruto, who was trailing behind Yor. Ilia was behind him and she was so exhausted that she couldn't even speak anymore. She was the one of them who was sweating the most and her legs were the shortest. They were getting in morning training. Naruto had woken them up at 5 AM and told them to get dressed in their combat uniforms. He had them do 200 push-ups, 200 sit-ups, 200 jumping jacks, 200 squats, and now they were going on a 15-kilometer run to finish off the morning training. Naruto wasn't cruel in that he expected you to do every single goal. If you could only do 50 push-ups, then Naruto just demanded that you do 60 push-ups and then rest up for the next bit of training. Trevor could do most of the training, though he struggled with the sit-ups and squats, but the 15-kilometer run was killing him. Ilia couldn't do any of the basic training. Naruto slowed down so that Trevor passed him because Ilia collapsed onto the ground. Naruto just scooped Ilia right up and held her under his arm. Then, Naruto picked his pace up and started to run in front of Trevor again. Ilia was just dead in Naruto's arm, having gone completely limp. How are you twabberly even sweating? Trevor found this training to be worse than the physical training that his family made him go through in his previous world. Yor seemed to treat this like it was a relaxing morning job, being able to keep up a pace ahead of all of them. Naruto wasn't struggling, but he just wasn't as fast as Yor was on his feet thanks to how different their weights were and how long Yor's legs were. Well, get used to this, because stamina training is super important. You doing okay up there, Yor? Naruto called out to the assassin. I'm doing fine, let me know if you want me to take a turn carrying Ilia. Will do. Atheists too are freakshuman freaks. Trevor was going to make a note to himself to always drink water before bed so that he never woke up with a hangover. That way he would never have to do this morning training while also hungover. Thank God it's over. Trevor called out as they reached the dorms again. The hellish first morning training was over. Okay then, let's hit the showers. After the showers. Man, that was fun. Ilia stated as she ate breakfast. After Yor had given her a shower, when she couldn't move, she felt a lot better. Her body was sore, but the soreness was quickly going away. Plunger. Oh lighten up, the other benefit to waking up early is we can get a big breakfast in before class. Naruto nudged Trevor. Yor nodded her head and had a decently sized breakfast, not as big as either Naruto or Ilia, but she was eating well. Also, why did you call it fun? You couldn't even finish one of the things Naruto had us do. Trevor mentally complained as he looked at Ilia, who had fully recovered from the training now and was sitting next to Naruto. She had copied the breakfast he had gotten for himself and he doubted she could even finish all of it herself. So it is the goal for this training. No goal, just a good morning workout to keep up our stamina. Training of this level won't actually make you too much stronger, but it will improve your stamina. I don't want my team to die because we were attacked by a horde of Grimm and didn't have the stamina to fight for a long time. Naruto wasn't going to push strength training on them so that they could all kill Grim with their bare fists. Ilia, no matter how much she trained, wouldn't be able to reach that level, and Trevor, for how well built he was not a raw strength type of fighter, judging by his whips. Yor nodded. Trevor nodded too, but he sighed when he nodded. Wait, this training won't make me stronger? Ilia asked with some surprise. It will make you stronger, but body weight training really depends on your body weight. You don't weight a lot, so you won't get the same benefit me or Trevor get. This is more about training your stamina. You can have all the strength in the world, but if you lack stamina, somebody 100 times weaker than you can outlast you and kill you. Naruto didn't have nearly the stats in this world as his previous, which is why he wanted to get his stamina as high as he could. He also wanted his team to get their stamina up as well, if only so that they were never in a position where they were overwhelmed easily by raw numbers. Ilia nodded. Okay, that makes sense. So we're going to be doing this every morning. We'll take 2 days off from morning training, we can decide which days later. We can put that to a team vote. Naruto offered Yor and Trevor the chance to have their opinions in as well. Trevor sighed in relief. So he isn't going to try and turn us all into brute force monsters like him, and Yor, that is such a relief. Trevor thought. Of course, I do expect everyone to keep training to work on their own skills. I want everyone to work on what they think they need to work on. As team leader, I am happy to give anyone any help they need, just ask. Naruto offered openly. He wasn't going to push his harsh training onto them, other than the stamina training. His fighting style required him to have a lot of brute force and fast reflexes, but he could tell that Ilia, for example, wasn't the type of fighter who would fit his style. He would leave it up to Ilia to figure out how to improve her combat abilities and help her where he could if she wanted. Is this how your military did things? Yor asked him. Exactly, the basic soldiers get pretty basic training, and then you are expected to train yourself and find a teacher who can teach you more about your specialty. A hand-to-hand specialist would get basic training from their squad leader and then would get special attention from whoever they wanted to apprentice under. How about you, Trevor? Naruto asked the other guy. Most of my skills came from on-the-job experience. Trevor kept it rather simple. Other students were starting to come into the cafeteria for breakfast now. By the time the other students got their food, Team Knight had finished eating and started to head back to the dorms to get ready for the first day of class. The Beacon class schedule was annoying to say the least. 4.5 days a week, 4 of the days the schedule was 7:30 am, when breakfast started to get served with classes starting at 8 am, lunch from 12:30 to 1:30, more classes after then until 5 pm, when students could use the sparring arena freely, until dinner was served at 6 pm. The structure of classes and meals was pretty strict, though the meals were free, the vending machine you got snacks at were not. Beacon had several types classes with 6 teachers. Peter Port, teacher of Grim Studies and the military strategy classes. Bartholomew Oblique, teacher of history, legends of remnant classes. Thumbelina Peach, teacher of plant sciences. Anne Green, teacher of stealth and security. Harold Mulberry, teacher of weapon crafting and upkeep. Finally, there was Glinda Goodwitch, the teacher who oversaw both combat class and the teacher who would watch over students if they visited the arena during self-directed sparring. Since there was no math, science, written language, or any book learning classes that Naruto struggled with, he was actually able to breeze through the classes with extreme ease. Plant studies was easy for him, but stealth class and military strategy were looking to be classes he wasn't even going to slightly struggle with. 3 days at the school was a long time to be bored, so he may as well enjoy some of the subjects they were teaching. This windbag tells such boring stories. Trevor complained to Naruto as they barely listened to one of Peter Port's long-winded speeches where he talked about his past achievements when fighting Grim. Trevor was leaned back in his chair with his legs propped up on his deck, which wasn't too different from the posture that Naruto had at the moment. Peter had brought a Borbidisc into class on the first day of school, but now it was the 4th day and he had another cage. This time there was a Beowulf in the cage, so he had little doubt that he was going to have another student fight the Grim, the snarling beast ready to fight. I think his stories are just wonderful though. Yor was the only member of the team who seemed to genuinely want to listen to the stories, but she was too nice for her own good. Ilia was leaning against Naruto with her jaw slack, sleeping through the class with her eyes fluttering between awake and asleep. The class was boring. Even if there was going to be a fight with a Beowulf. Later. Now this is a class you'd him boy. Get your fist and jam it straight into his liver. Trevor shouted out as the leader of Team Juniper was put up against the leader of Team Cardinal again. Glinda seemed to have a lot of desire to pit the leaders of the teams up against each other. Just like how she put the matching letters of each team against each other. The second letter of a team name would go against the second letter of another team name. Due to the John guy is going to lose, he has lost against the Cardin guy like 3 times already. He hasn't lasted more than a minute against the Cardin dude. Naruto didn't see why Trevor was cheering on John. The guy just wasn't a warrior at heart. Naruto could see a weakness in the boy that came with a soul that was too gentle. Or maybe instead of gentle, maybe just pacifist. Naruto corrected himself. Pick his butt, Carden. Since everyone hated Carden for being a bully, Ilia actually cheered for Carden to win the fight since she enjoyed pissing people off by cheering for him. Ilia didn't actually care who won or lost the fight, but seeing a stronger opponent pick on a weaker one made her happy. You're cheering for a bully. Oh, suck it up, Schneebrat, if you keep crying, wine won't be the only thing that gets on your dress. Ilia mocked Weiss Schnee when the girl in front of her spoke up. Weiss looked pissed. Naruto sighed when he saw 3 of the members of Team RWBY were currently glaring at Ilia. Ruby Rose looked confused. Blake and Yang weren't even glaring at Ilia, they were glaring at Trevor, who was shouting right behind them pretty loudly. Oh come on, you could have had him. Trevor sat back down in annoyance when John lost another fight against Carden. Both fighters went back into the stands. Okay, seeing as we still have 25 minutes, we have time for a couple more fights hopefully. Okay, Miss Rose and Mr. Uzumaki, how about you two come down? Glinda stated as she waved her riding crop, and any damage Carden did with his weapon were fixed. Naruto just stood up and hopped over the railing, landing in the middle of the arena. Ruby appeared in a flurry rush of rose petals, her weapon unfolded into his side. Seems our teams don't really like each other too much, though. You know what that is about, oh. I'm Ruby Rose, I hope you don't go easy on me. Ruby extended her hand to Naruto to shake it before the match. Naruto grabbed her hand, firmly shook it once, before letting go and rubbing the back of his head and looking at the teams. Crush her skull. Pick his butt. Fist her in the ass. Language. Glinda stated as she looked across the teams, and Ruby was blushing brightly at that last one. Naruto just sighed and rubbed the back of his head. I seriously have no clue why my team and yours have so much beef. Okay, I won't go easy on you. Come at me like I'm a gremlin. Naruto unsheathed his sword, but he kept it relaxed at his side. Ruby took up a stance and got ready for the fight, but Naruto just stayed relaxed against her. The fight started. Ruby rushed at him in a burst of rose petals, but not faster than he could react. Naruto shoved his foot right into the middle of the rose petals and kicked Ruby right in the stomach hard enough to knock her back. The TV screen above them that kept track of their auras showed that Ruby lost a small chunk of her aura when she took the hit. She actually recovered though by firing her weapon and stabbing it into the floor before firing it again and sending herself flying towards him. She had her weapon already in spin. He ducked the first attack, sidestepped the next 6 attacks, and he found his face at the end of her weapon when she turned it into a long gun. He just pushed the weapon up with his palm when she fired, and she missed him. He grabbed her weapon and kicked her in the stomach again, but kept a firm hand on her weapon. While she went flying, her weapon stayed right in his hand. Hey, not fair taking my weapon, keep your cool, Ruby. Ruby popped back to her feet, got angry, and then calmed down. She used her semblance again and went rushing towards him. She veered off course when she expected him to kick her again. Instead, Naruto grabbed the back of her cloak when she veered off course. There was just a clear difference in their skill and experience. She might be faster than him, but she wasn't so fast that his experience didn't let him react and avoid her. Her attacks might be confusing with all of the spins, but Naruto had experience with people who used a lot of footwork in their attacks like that. Click. Naruto disconnected his arm and dropped it on top of Ruby's neck when she hit the ground. His arm sunk into the floor, and with how it was curved he nailed her to the floor. So heavy. I can't budge it. Ruby was trapped on the floor by his arm, and Naruto just stepped on her belly and pushed her into the ground. She couldn't even kick him from where he was standing, all she could do was try and get his arm off of her body and stop pinning her to the floor. There were 4 students who had not been touched in class by their opponents. Naruto, Yor, Ilia, and Pura were the 4 students who nobody had so much as laid a finger on in the class. Ilia was a faster who had her familiars fight for her. Pura seemed strangely above her year in skill, and then Naruto and Yor were just too experienced with close combat and were just too slippery to land a good hit on by the inexperienced opponents they were fighting again. At the moment though, while Naruto, Yor, and Ilia were all untouched, Trevor had been challenged by Ran and Yang to the point he had to work for his victories. Ruby's aura was rapidly decreasing because Naruto kept stomping on her. Okay, match over. Naruto picked his arm up when Glinda stated that, and he attached it back to his body. Naruto offered a hand to Ruby, who was red in the face from the effort it had taken to try and remove his arm from her body. Jerk, that was totally bullying. Sorry, Yang can be a bit protective there, but that was a good match. I'll try again and see how it goes next time. Will Miss Long, Miss Belladonna, and Miss Schnee please come down? Naruto, since you aren't harmed and your aura is full, I expect to see you perform well. Glinda stated as she called down the rest of Team RWBY down to face off against him. Naruto started to sweat. Why are you trying to make those girls hate me? This isn't going to end well for them. Naruto whispered to Glinda. She raised a brow. I would have had Miss Nikos, Miss Brier, or even Miss Einsburn do the same thing if they were done here. Since one-on-one combat doesn't seem quite effective to train you for. Glinda just wanted to give all of the students a challenge according to their proper level. Naruto sighed when he had 3 opponents. The end of the duel. Weiss and Blake were tied to each other. Naruto had wrapped the 2 of them in his arm, with it extended, and they were currently on the ground with their aura depleted. Naruto had his knee on Yang's lower back, pushing her into the ground as well, only her face was in a crater in the floor. Naruto had his other hand on the back of her head and had dazed her by slamming her forehead into the floor with enough force to make a crater in the floor. They had no teamwork skills on their own. Without a leader, they just didn't work together that well. It wasn't much of a challenge for him to predict what they were going to do in battle and then dodge and counter. Weiss seemed very pissed at her loss though as she glared death at him. Naruto unwrapped Weiss and Blake since the match was over. That is time, if anyone would like to stay, you can. Dinner is in an hour, please do not be late if you want to eat. Glinda ended the class with that. Naruto just sighed in relief and started to walk away, getting off Yang to do so. Naruto joined his team as they started to leave the arena. You know, for all the ways you and Yor Brier two couldn't fight more differently. She goes total offense, well you tend to wait for your opponent to make the first move and counter them. Get any tips? Trevor asked Naruto as he placed his hand on his whips. Naruto shook his head. I have never used a whip before, so I couldn't tell you any tips. Let's get out of here before Yang wakes up and sees her head in a crater. Naruto didn't want to be there when that anger bomb went off. All offense, all that to me if the enemy can't attack me, they can't win. Yor stated with a deadly look on her face. It scared Ilia for a second when she looked up and saw the face, before Ilia went back to normal. I enjoyed the fact that you gave the Schnee bitch a little more humiliation. Hehehe. Why does she hate you so much? Naruto asked Ilia with so much confusion, since Weiss seemed to actually have a hatred for Ilia and it wasn't even funny. It seemed like there was actual bad blood between them. Ilia looked away. She giggled an evil giggle. Okay, but why do Blake and Yang had beef with you? Naruto changed subjects to Trevor instead. They didn't like what my beef did to them. I have more questions and I didn't want the answers. Naruto covered his face with his hand since this was a problem he was pretty sure he was going to have to solve. Most of Team RWBY seemed to have some sort of anger directed at half of his team. Trevor, solve your shit with Yang and Blake. Ilia, solve your crap with Weiss. Says the one who humiliated the entire team by not punching them. Trevor responded to him. You could have let them get a hit. They told me not to go easy, so I didn't let them touch me. Also, they just aren't that good yet. I don't need to give anyone false confidence. It would be cruel of me to do that. Naruto didn't think of himself as a cruel person, and giving his opponents false confidence in fighting was just cruel. It would only hurt them later down the line. Exactly, if your opponent doesn't want you to hold back, you shouldn't hold back. You beat Blake so badly that if it weren't for her aura, she would have died and Glinda had to stop you from killing the girl. Trevor pointed to Yor with an accusation. Yor scared him. It was an accident, she told me not to hold back, so I didn't move. Yor pouted rather cutely at the misunderstanding. There is a difference between not holding back and going for the kill. Naruto deadpanned at Yor before he looked at Trevor and Ilia. He wondered if they even could solve the problems they had with Team RWBY. So this part ends here. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, so quickly like this video for second part of this series. And comment down below your thoughts about this series. And now it's time for me to go, bye.